poor lady was crying on a bench. A millionaire woman went to help and was shocked when the incessant ringing of her phone jolted Amelia Townsend from her fitful sleep. She fumbled in the darkness, her hand groping for the vibrating device on her nightstand. The glowing screen showed an unfamiliar number, and for a moment she considered letting it go to voicemail. Something, perhaps a premonition, compelled her to answer. "Hello?" Her voice was groggy, laced with irritation at being awakened at such an ungodly hour. "Is this Amelia Townsend?" The voice on the other end was elderly, trembling with an urgency that immediately set Amelia on edge. "Yes, this is she. Who is this?" There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. I'm not sure I should be calling. But I had to. I've seen you, you know, at those charity events in the old neighborhood." Amelia sat up, fully awake now. Her mind raced, trying to place the voice, to make sense of this cryptic midnight call. "I'm sorry, but who are you? How did you get this number?" Another pause, longer this time. "I'm nobody, just an old woman who's made too many mistakes. At you look so much like her, like your grandmother." The word hit Amelia like a physical blow. Grandmother. She had never known her grandmother. Her father had always told her that both her grandparents had died before she was born. I think you must have the wrong person," Amelia stammered, her heart pounding in her chest. "No, I don't think I do," the old woman replied, her voice growing stronger. "You have her eyes, you know. Helen's eyes." Helen. The name echoed in Amelia's mind, stirring something deep within her. A memory, perhaps, or the ghost of one. "I'm sorry, but I really don't understand," Amelia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My grandparents are dead. They've been dead for years." The old woman's laugh was bitter, tinged with a sadness that seemed to seep through the phone. "Is that what they told you? Oh, my dear girl, there's so much you don't know." Before Amelia could respond, the line went dead. She sat there in the darkness, the phone still pressed to her ear, her mind reeling. Who was that woman? And more importantly, what did she know? Sleep eluded Amelia for the rest of the night. As the first rays of dawn crept through her window, she made a decision. She would find that woman, no matter what it took. Days passed, and Amelia found herself drawn to the old neighborhood where she often volunteered. Her eyes scanned every face, searching for the owner of that haunting voice. And then on a crisp autumn afternoon she saw her. The old woman was sitting on a bench in a small, run-down park. Her clothes were worn but clean, her white hair neatly combed. But it was her eyes that caught Amelia's attention. They were a startling shade of green, filled with a wisdom and sorrow that seemed to transcend time. As Amelia approached, the woman looked up, their eyes met, and in that moment Amelia knew. This was the woman who had called her. This was the woman who held the key to unlocking the secrets of her past. "Hello," Amelia said softly, her heart pounding in her chest. "I think you've been looking for me." The old woman smiled, a sad, gentle smile that seemed to hold the weight of the world. "No, my dear," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think you've been looking for me." And with those words, Amelia Townsend's world tilted on its axis. Little did she know that this encounter would be the first step on a journey that would unravel everything she thought she knew about her family, her past, and herself. A journey that would lead her to uncover long-buried secrets, face heartbreaking truths, and ultimately redefine the very meaning of family. Amelia Townsend stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse apartment, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape below. The early morning light cast a golden glow over the skyscrapers, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within her. Born into one of the most influential families on the East Coast, Amelia had always known a life of privilege. The Townsend name carried weight in boardrooms and ballrooms alike, opening doors that remained firmly shut to others. But with that privilege came expectations that had shaped every aspect of Amelia's life since childhood. She turned away from the window, her eyes falling on a framed photo on her desk. It showed a younger version of herself standing proudly next to her father, Charles Townsend. His face wore the same stern expression it always did, a constant reminder of the legacy she was expected to uphold. Charles Townsend was a man of few words and even fewer displays of emotion. Since the death of Amelia's mother when she was just a child, he had become even more distant, burying himself in work and the preservation of the family name. Amelia could count on one hand the number of times she had seen him smile in the past decade. As she picked up the photo, Amelia's mind wandered to the fragments of memory she had of her mother. A gentle touch, a soft laugh, the scent of lavender. These were all that remained of the woman who had given her life. Her father rarely spoke of her mother, and any attempts to broach the subject were met with swift changes of topic or stony silence. Amelia set the photo down with a sigh. The encounter with the old woman in the park had stirred up questions she had long since buried. Who was Helen? And why had her father never mentioned her grandmother? As she prepared for another day of board meetings and charity luncheons, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of something life-changing. The carefully constructed facade of the Townsend family was about to crack, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what lay beneath. Across town, in a modest apartment that had seen better days, Helen sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold before her. Her gnarled hands trembled slightly as she reached for an old, leather-bound journal. Opening it, she traced her fingers over a faded photograph tucked between its pages. The photo showed a young couple, their faces alight with love and hope. The man was tall and handsome, with kind eyes and a mischievous smile. The woman beside him was beautiful, her green eyes, the same eyes that had caught Amelia's attention, sparkling with joy. Helen and James captured in a moment of perfect happiness before fate tore them apart. Helen's mind drifted back to those days, to the stolen moments in the Townsend Mansion's gardens, to whispered promises and dreams of a future together. But those dreams had been shattered by the harsh realities of class divisions and family expectations. James had been the gardener's son, a fact that made him utterly unsuitable in the eyes of the Townsend family. Their love had been forbidden, their relationship a scandal waiting to happen, and when Helen had discovered she was pregnant, everything had fallen apart. She closed the journal, her heart heavy with the weight of secrets long kept. For years she had watched from afar as the Townsend family thrived, as Amelia grew into a woman Helen knew would have made James proud. And now, after all this time, a chance encounter had opened the door to the past. As Helen contemplated the consequences of her actions, across the city, Charles Townsend sat in his opulent office, staring at a small, innocuous envelope on his desk. And the handwriting on it was achingly familiar, a ghost from the past he had thought long buried. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope, pulling out a single sheet of paper. As he read the contents, the color drained from his face. The carefully constructed walls he had built around his family's secrets were about to come crumbling down. Meanwhile, Amelia was throwing herself into her work, desperately trying to push aside the questions that plagued her. She moved from meeting to meeting, her smile never faltering, her composure never slipping. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. As she left her final meeting of the day, Amelia's phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number, containing only an address and a simple message: "If you want to know the truth, come alone." Amelia stared at the screen, her heart racing. This was it, the moment that would change everything. With a deep breath, she made her decision. It was time to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As the sun began to set over the city, 3 individuals in different parts of town prepared themselves for a confrontation that had been decades in the making. Amelia, Helen, and Charles, each carrying their own burdens, their own secrets, their own fears. The stage was set for a reunion that would shake the very foundations of the Townsend family legacy. Little did they know that their lives were about to intersect in ways they could never have imagined, setting in motion a chain of events that would test the bounds of love, loyalty, and forgiveness. The truth, long buried beneath layers of lies and half-truths, was finally ready to emerge. And you, dear readers, are invited to join us on this journey of discovery. As we delve deeper into the Townsend family's past and unravel the complex web of relationships that bind them, we promise you a story filled with emotion, suspense, and unexpected twists. To ensure you don't miss a single moment of this gripping tale, we kindly ask you to subscribe to our channel. For your support not only encourages us to continue bringing you captivating stories, but also helps us create even more engaging content in the future. So hit that subscribe button and join us as we uncover the secrets that lie at the heart of the Townsend family saga. The best is yet to come, and we can't wait to share it with you. Amelia's heart pounded as she approached the address she'd been given. It was a small, run-down apartment building in a part of town she rarely visited. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the buzzer for apartment 3 billion. The door buzzed open without a word, and Amelia stepped into the dimly lit hallway. As she reached the 3rd floor, she saw a door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, she found herself face to face with the old woman from the park. "Come in, Amelia," the woman said softly. "It's time we talked." Amelia entered the modest apartment, her eyes taking in the faded photographs on the walls, the worn furniture, and the unmistakable scent of lavender that seemed to permeate the air. "Who are you?" Amelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "And how do you know me?" The old woman smiled sadly. "My name is Helen, and I'm your grandmother." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Amelia felt her world tilt on its axis, her mind struggling to process this revelation. "But that's impossible," she stammered. "My grandparents are dead. My father told me." "Your father told you what he thought was best," Helen interrupted gently. "But the truth, my dear, is far more complicated." Over the next hour, Helen unraveled a tale that left Amelia reeling. She spoke of a forbidden love between a wealthy heiress and a gardener's son, of family disapproval and harsh ultimatums, of a child given up and a life lived in exile. "Your grandfather, James, was the kindest man I've ever known," Helen said, her eyes misting with memories. "But to your great-grandfather he was nothing more than a servant. When I fell in love with James, I was given a choice, give him up or lose everything." Amelia listened, transfixed, as Helen recounted how she had chosen love over wealth, how she had been cast out of the family, pregnant and alone. But the story didn't end there. "There's more, Amelia," Helen said, her voice trembling. "Something I've kept secret for all these years. And you have an uncle, my son, who was taken from me shortly after birth." The revelation hit Amelia like a physical blow. An uncle she never knew existed, a cousin perhaps, an entire branch of her family tree hidden from view. "Why are you telling me this now?" Amelia asked, whirling with questions. Helen's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Because time is running out, my dear. I'm dying, and before I go, I need to make things right. I need to find my son, your uncle, and I need your help to do it." As the gravity of Helen's words sank in, Amelia felt a surge of determination. This was more than just uncovering family secrets. It was about reuniting a mother with a long-lost child, about healing wounds that had festered for decades. "I'll help you," Amelia said firmly. "Whatever it takes, we'll find him." Helen's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Thank you, Amelia, but you must understand this won't be easy. Your father, he won't want these secrets exposed. He spent a lifetime burying the past." Amelia thought of her father, of the stern, unyielding man who had raised her. She thought of the distance between them, the unspoken tensions that had always simmered beneath the surface of their relationship. For the first time, she began to see him not just as her father, but as a man shaped by his own pain and loss. "I'll deal with my father," Amelia said, a steely resolve in her voice. "He can't keep these secrets buried any longer. It's time for the truth to come out." As she left Helen's apartment that evening, Amelia felt as though she was stepping into a new world. The city around her looked the same, but everything had changed. She was no longer just Amelia Townsend, heiress to a fortune and a name. She was a woman on a mission, determined to uncover the truth and reunite a family torn apart by pride and prejudice. Little did she know that her journey was just beginning, and that the road ahead would be filled with more twists, turns, and heartbreaks than she could ever have imagined. The secrets of the Townsend family ran deep, and bringing them to light would test the limits of love, loyalty, and forgiveness. As Amelia drove home, her mind racing with all she had learned, she made a silent vow. No matter what it took, no matter the cost, she would uncover the truth. She would find her uncle, heal the rifts in her family, and finally understand the legacy she had inherited. The stage was set for a family drama that would shake the very foundations of the Townsend Empire, and Amelia, armed with the truth and driven by a newfound purpose, was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Amelia's resolve solidified as she drove back to her penthouse. The weight of Helen's revelations pressed heavily on her shoulders, but with it came a sense of purpose she had never known before. As she entered her apartment, she knew sleep would elude her tonight. Instead, she headed straight for her home office, determined to begin her investigation immediately. For hours, Amelia pored over old family records, birth certificates, and newspaper clippings. The more she dug, the more she realized how little she truly knew about her family's history. There were gaps in the timeline, inconsistencies in the stories she'd been told. It was as if someone had deliberately obscured certain parts of the Townsend past. As dawn broke, Amelia knew what she had to do next. She had to confront her father. With trepidation building in her chest, she dialed Charles Townsend's private number. "Amelia." Her father's voice was gruff with sleep. "What's wrong? It's barely 6 a.m. "Dad, we need to talk," Amelia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's important. Can you meet me at the house in an hour?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Is everything all right?" "No, Dad, it's not. But it will be, once we talk." An hour later, Amelia stood in the study of the Townsend mansion, her childhood home. The room was exactly as she remembered it. Imposing mahogany bookshelves, the scent of leather and old paper, and at the center of it all, her father's massive desk. Charles Townsend entered the room, his face a mask of concern and confusion. "Amelia, what's this about?" Taking a deep breath, Amelia looked her father in the eye. "Dad, I know about Helen. I know about James. And I know I have an uncle out there somewhere." The color drained from Charles's face. For a moment he looked older and more vulnerable than Amelia had ever seen him. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vulnerability vanished, replaced by a hardness she knew all too well. "Who told you this?" he demanded. "Helen did," Amelia replied, standing her ground. "And before you ask, yes, I've met her. She's alive, Dad. Your mother is alive, and she's been living just across town all this time." Charles sank into his chair, his composure cracking. "You don't understand, Amelia. The things that happened, the choices that were made, it was all for the good of this family." "Was it?" Amelia challenged. "Was it good for the family to cast out your own mother? To separate her from her child? To lie to me my entire life?" "You don't know what you're talking about," Charles snapped, his anger flaring. "Helen made her choice. She chose that gardener over her family. She brought shame to the Townsend name." "She chose love, Dad," Amelia retorted. "And for that you punished her. You took away her child." "My uncle, your brother, where is he? What happened to him?" Charles's face contorted with a mix of pain and anger. "That's none of your concern. What's done is done. The past should stay in the past." But Amelia wasn't backing down. "No, Dad, not this time. I want the truth, all of it. And if you won't give it to me, I'll find it myself." For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other, the tension between them palpable. Then, Charles seemed to deflate, the fight leaving him all at once. "His name was David," he said quietly. "Your uncle, he was adopted by a family in a small town upstate. That's all I know. That's all I've ever allowed myself to know." Amelia felt a surge of triumph, quickly tempered by the realization of how much pain this secret had caused. "Why, Dad? Why keep this hidden for so long?" Charles looked up at her, his eyes filled with a sadness she had never seen before. "And to protect you, Amelia. To protect all of us. The scandal, it would have destroyed everything we've built." "But at what cost?" Amelia asked softly. "Look at what it's done to our family, to you." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the study, Amelia and Charles talked. Really talked, for what felt like the first time in years. Charles spoke of his own pain, of growing up with the knowledge that his mother had chosen another man over her family. He spoke of the pressure to maintain the Townsend legacy, of the fear that had driven him to bury the past so deeply. Amelia listened, her heart breaking for the lonely, angry boy her father must have been. But as much as she understood his pain, she couldn't condone his actions. "Dad," she said gently, "I know you thought you were protecting us, but these secrets, they've poisoned our family for too long. It's time to make things right." Charles looked at her, a mix of pride and fear in his eyes. "And how do you propose we do that?" "We find him," Amelia said firmly. "We find David. We bring him home." For a moment Charles looked like he might argue. Then slowly he nodded. "You're right. It's time. But Amelia, you need to understand, this could change everything. Our family, our reputation, nothing will be the same." Amelia reached out and took her father's hand. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing, Dad. Maybe it's time for a change." As she left the mansion that morning, Amelia felt a mix of emotions: hope, fear, determination. She knew the road ahead would be difficult. Finding David after all these years wouldn't be easy, and even if they did find him, there was no guarantee he'd want anything to do with the family that had given him up. But Amelia was ready for the challenge. She had a name now, David, her uncle, lost to time and circumstance. As she drove back to her apartment, her mind was already racing with plans. She would hire the best private investigators, use every resource at her disposal. Whatever it took, she would find David and bring him home. Little did Amelia know that her decision that morning would set in motion a chain of events that would test her in ways she could never have imagined. The search for David would uncover more secrets, more lies, and ultimately force the Townsend family to confront the truth about themselves and their past. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles, but Amelia was determined to see it through. For Helen, for David, for her father, and for herself, she would unravel the tangled web of the Townsend family history. And in doing so, she might just find the sense of belonging and purpose she had always longed for. As she pulled into her parking spot, Amelia's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her heart raced as she read the message. "Thank you for believing in me. Be careful. The truth can be dangerous, HR." With renewed determination, Amelia stepped out of her car. The search for David had begun, and with it, the next chapter in the Townsend family saga. The truth, long buried, was finally coming to light, and nothing would ever be the same again. The search for David began in earnest. Amelia hired the best private investigators money could buy, providing them with all the information she had gleaned from her father and Helen. Days turned into weeks as they combed through adoption records, birth certificates, and old newspaper clippings. Amelia threw herself into the search with a fervor that surprised even her. She spent countless hours poring over reports, following up on leads, and reaching out to contacts who might have information. Her work at the family company took a backseat, much to the concern of her colleagues and the board of directors. As the weeks wore on, the trail seemed to grow colder. David's adoption had been handled discreetly, with many of the records sealed or destroyed. It was as if someone had deliberately tried to erase all traces of his existence. One rainy afternoon, as Amelia sat in her office, surrounded by stacks of papers and feeling discouraged, her phone rang. It was Helen. "Amelia, dear," Helen's voice was weak, but there was an urgency to it that made Amelia's heart race. "I need to see you. Can you come over?" Within the hour, Amelia was at Helen's apartment. The moment she saw her grandmother's face, she knew something was terribly wrong. Helen sat her down, taking Amelia's hands in her own. "The doctor's called today," she said softly. "The tests, they're not good, Amelia. I have cancer, and it's advanced. They're giving me 6 months, maybe a year." The news hit Amelia like a physical blow. She had only just found Helen, and now she was facing the prospect of losing her again. "No," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "There must be something we can do. Treatments, specialists." Helen shook her head gently. "I've made my peace with it, my dear. But it makes finding David all the more urgent. I need to see him, Amelia. I need to make things right before." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Amelia understood. The race against time had just become much more critical. With renewed determination, Amelia redoubled her efforts. She reached out to every contact she had, called in every favor, and pushed her investigators to work around the clock. The Townsend name and fortune opened many doors, but still, David remained elusive. As Amelia's search intensified, so did the tensions within the family. Charles, seeing his daughter's obsession with finding David, grew increasingly agitated. He alternated between periods of withdrawn silence and explosive anger. One evening, during a rare family dinner, the simmering tensions finally boiled over. "This is madness, Amelia," Charles snapped, slamming his fist on the table. "You're neglecting your responsibilities to the company. You're dredging up past that should stay buried. And for what? And a man who probably doesn't even want to be found." Amelia stood her ground. "This isn't just about finding David, Dad. It's about healing our family. Helen is dying. Don't you think she deserves to see her son one last time?" Charles's face contorted with a mix of pain and anger. "And what about me? What about my feelings? Do you have any idea what it's like to know your mother chose another man over you? To live with that rejection every day of your life?" For a moment, Amelia was stunned into silence. She had been so focused on Helen and David that she hadn't fully considered her father's pain. But her resolve didn't waver. "I'm sorry for what you went through, Dad," she said softly. "But continuing to punish Helen, to punish David, it's not going to heal that pain. It's time to let go of the past and try to build a better future." Charles stormed out of the room, leaving Amelia alone with her thoughts. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was more determined than ever to see it through. As the search for David continued, Amelia found herself spending more and more time with Helen. Despite her declining health, Helen's spirit remained strong. She shared stories of her youth, of her love for James, and of the brief time she had with baby David before he was taken away. One afternoon, as they sat in Helen's small living room, Helen handed Amelia a worn leather journal. "I want you to have this," she said. "It's all my memories, my hopes, my regrets. Maybe it will help you understand, and maybe it will help you find David." Amelia took the journal with trembling hands. That night she stayed up reading, tears streaming down her face as she immersed herself in Helen's world. The love, the pain, the longing, it was all there, written in Helen's elegant script. As dawn broke, Amelia reached the final entry. It was dated just a few days ago. "My dearest David, I don't know if you'll ever read these words, but I need to write them. I want you to know that not a day has gone by that I haven't thought of you, loved you, missed you. The choice to give you up was made for me, but the pain of that decision has been mine to bear all these years. I hope that wherever you are, you've had a good life, filled with love and happiness. And I hope that someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. All my love, always. Your mother, Helen." Wiping away her tears, Amelia made a silent vow. She would find David no matter what it took. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. One of the investigators discovered a small obituary in a local newspaper from a town upstate. It mentioned a David Collins, survived by his wife Sarah and daughter Emily. The dates matched, and the location fit with what Charles had told her. Heart-pounding, Amelia made the call. A woman answered, her voice cautious. "Hello, is this Sarah Collins?" "Yes, who's this?" Amelia took a deep breath. My name is Amelia Townsend. I believe your husband might be my uncle." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Then, I think you'd better come here. We need to talk." The drive to the small town where David lived felt like the longest journey of Amelia's life. As she pulled up to the modest house, she saw a woman standing on the porch. Sarah Collins was in her early 50s with kind eyes and a wary expression. "Mrs. Collins," Amelia said, extending her hand. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Sarah nodded, leading Amelia inside. "David's not here," she said quietly. He's in the hospital. Our daughter Emily is with him." Amelia's heart sank. "Is he all right?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "He had a heart attack last week. The doctors, they're not optimistic." The news hit Amelia like a physical blow. After all this time searching, was she too late? Over cups of coffee, Sarah shared David's story. He had always known he was adopted, but had never felt the need to search for his birth parents. He had built a happy life with Sarah and Emily, working as a high school teacher and coach. But there were always questions, Sarah admitted, especially after Emily was born. She has a rare blood disorder, and the doctors asked about family medical history. That's when David started to wonder about his birth parents. Amelia listened, her heart aching for the uncle she had never known and the family had built. "Mrs. Collins," she said softly, "there's something you need to know. David's birth mother, my grandmother Helen, she's alive, and she's been searching for him." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Alive, but David was told his birth parents had died. "It's complicated," Amelia said, and proceeded to share the story of Helen and James, of family pride and prejudice, of secrets kept for decades. As she finished, Sarah sat in stunned silence. Finally she spoke. I think David needs to know this. But his condition, I'm not sure how he'll handle it." Amelia nodded, understanding the delicacy of the situation. "I understand, but please, if there's any way I could see him, even for a moment." Sarah considered for a long moment, then nodded. "Come with me to the hospital. I can't promise anything, but he should have the chance to know the truth." In the hospital was a maze of sterile corridors and beeping machines. As they approached David's room, Amelia's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Sarah entered first, speaking softly to someone inside. Then she beckoned Amelia in. David Collins lay in the hospital bed, looking pale and fragile. But his eyes, when they met Amelia's, were sharp and curious. Beside him sat a young woman who could only be Emily, her resemblance to Helen startling. "David," Sarah said gently, "this is Amelia. She has something important to tell you." Amelia stepped forward, her throat tight with emotion. "Mr. Collins, David, I'm your niece. And I'm here because your mother, my grandmother, she's been looking for you." The room fell silent as Amelia shared the story once again. David listened intently, his expression a mix of disbelief, anger, and longing. So when she finished, he closed his eyes, tears sliding down his cheeks. "All these years," he whispered, "all these years I thought, and now, when I might not have much time left." Emily took her father's hand, her own eyes filled with tears. "Dad, it's incredible. We have family we never knew about." David looked at Amelia, his gaze intense. "My mother, Helen, she's really alive, and she wants to see me." Amelia nodded, her own tears falling freely now, more than anything in the world. "And David, she's ill. She doesn't have much time either. Please, if you're willing, I'd like to bring her here, to give you both the chance to meet, to talk." David was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had learned. Finally, he squeezed Emily's hand and looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes," he said, his voice stronger now. "Yes, I want to meet her. I need to meet her." As Amelia left the hospital that day, her heart was full of a mix of emotions: joy at having finally found David, sorrow for the years lost, and hope for the reunion to come. She knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time in months, she felt a sense of true optimism. On the drive back to the city, Amelia's mind raced with plans. She needed to tell Helen to arrange for her to travel to see David, and she needed to inform her father. Charles needed to be a part of this too, to face the brother he had never known and the mother he had pushed away. As she neared the city limits, her phone rang. It was the hospital where David was staying. Her heart in her throat, Amelia answered. "Miss Townsend, this is Dr. Roberts from Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about David Collins. There's been a complication." Amelia's world seemed to tilt on its axis as she listened to the doctor's words. David had suffered another heart attack. He was stable for now, but his condition was critical. The reunion she had hoped for might not have the happy ending she had envisioned. With a heavy heart, Amelia made her way to Helen's apartment. As she shared the news of finding David and his current condition, she watched her grandmother's face cycle through a range of emotions: joy, sorrow, fear, and finally determination. "We must go to him," Helen said, her voice stronger than Amelia had heard in weeks. "I need to see my son, Amelia. No matter what happens, I need to see him." Amelia nodded, already making mental plans for the journey. "We'll leave first thing in the morning. I'll make all the arrangements." As she left Helen's apartment, Amelia steeled herself for one more difficult conversation. She needed to tell her father about David's condition and the impending reunion. She found Charles in his study, as always surrounded by work papers. "Dad," she said softly, "I found him. I found David." Charles's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a mix of emotions Amelia couldn't quite decipher. You found him? Where? How is he?" Amelia took a deep breath and shared everything, finding David, his family, his condition, and the planned reunion. As she spoke, she watched her father's face, seeing the conflict playing out behind his eyes. When she finished, Charles was silent for a long moment. Then, to Amelia's surprise, he stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I want to go with you," he said quietly. "I need to see him too, to see my brother." Amelia felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this reunion could begin to heal the wounds that had festered in their family for so long. As dawn broke the next morning, an unlikely group gathered outside the Townsend mansion. Amelia, supporting a frail but determined Helen, Charles looking more vulnerable than Amelia had ever seen him, and a nurse they had hired to assist with Helen's care during the journey. The drive to the hospital was tense, filled with unspoken emotions and years of unresolved history. Helen sat in the back, her eyes closed, her lips moving in silent prayer. Charles gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. When they arrived at the hospital, Amelia led the way to David's room. Outside the door, they paused. Helen took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. Charles looked like he might bolt at any moment. "Are you ready?" Amelia asked softly. Helen nodded. "I've been ready for this moment for over 50 years. Slowly, Amelia opened the door. David lay in the bed, looking pale but alert. Sarah and Emily sat beside him, their faces a mix of anxiety and hope. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as Helen and David locked eyes for the first time in over 5 decades. Then, with a sob, Helen moved forward, her hands reaching out to her long-lost son. "David," she whispered, "my boy, my beautiful boy." David's eyes filled with tears as he grasped his mother's hands. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You're really here." As mother and son began to talk, their words tumbling out in a rush of explanations, apologies, and long-suppressed love, Amelia turned to her father. Charles stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the brother he had never known. Gently, Amelia took her father's hand and led him into the room. "David," she said softly, "there's someone else here to see you. This is Charles, your brother." David looked up, his eyes widening as he took in Charles's familiar features. For a long moment, the two brothers stared at each other, decades of separation and unspoken words hanging between them. Then slowly Charles moved forward. "Hello, David," he said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm sorry. For everything." As the reunited family began to talk, to share stories and memories, to bridge the gap of years lost, Amelia stepped back, watching the scene unfold. She knew that this was just the beginning, that there would be more tears, more difficult conversations, more healing to be done. But for now, in this moment, she allowed herself to feel a sense of accomplishment, of rightness. The Townsend family, long fractured by secrets and pride, was taking its first steps toward wholeness. As she watched Helen stroke David's hair, saw Charles awkwardly pat his brother's shoulder, and noticed Emily and Sarah's tearful smiles, Amelia knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The truth, long buried, had finally come to light, and with it came the possibility of a new beginning for them all. As the days passed, Amelia found herself becoming increasingly involved in David's family struggles. Emily's rare blood disorder, which had been manageable for years, was suddenly worsening. The doctors were recommending an experimental treatment, but the cost was astronomical, far beyond what David and Sarah could afford on a teacher's salary. Amelia, without hesitation, offered to cover the expenses. However, this decision sparked an internal conflict she hadn't anticipated. On one hand, she wanted to help her newfound family in any way she could. On the other, she was acutely aware of the power imbalance her wealth created. Would David and Sarah resent her for swooping in with her checkbook? Would they feel indebted to her? These concerns led Amelia to reflect on her own relationship with money and privilege. She had always taken her wealth for granted, seeing it as a tool to solve problems. But now, faced with the reality of her uncle's modest life and the struggles they faced, she began to question her own values and priorities. One evening, as she sat with Sarah in the hospital cafeteria, while David underwent tests, Sarah confided in her. "You know, Amelia," Sarah said, stirring her coffee absently, "when you first showed up, I was terrified. I thought you might be here to take David away from us, to pull him into your world of wealth and privilege. But now I see that you're just trying to help in the only way you know how." And Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. "I never meant to make you uncomfortable. I want to be part of this family. I want to help." Sarah reached out and squeezed Amelia's hand. "I know, dear, and we're grateful. But you have to understand, we've built our life on our own terms. David's always been proud of making his own way. This illness, Emily's condition, it's hard for him to accept help, even when we desperately need it." This conversation was a turning point for Amelia. She realized that true family wasn't about solving problems with money, but about being there, supporting each other through thick and thin. She began to spend more time at the hospital, not just writing checks, but sitting with David, talking with Emily about her hopes and fears, and even helping Sarah navigate the complex world of insurance and medical bureaucracy. As she immersed herself in the day-to-day struggles of David's family, Amelia found herself growing in ways she never expected. She learned patience from Sarah, who faced each new medical setback with calm determination. She learned courage from Emily, who endured painful treatments without complaint. And from David, even in his weakened state, she learned the value of a life lived with purpose and love, regardless of material wealth. This growth didn't go unnoticed by Charles. One evening, as they were leaving the hospital together, he turned to Amelia with an expression she'd never seen before, a mixture of pride and regret. "You know, Amelia," he said softly, "watching you these past weeks, I realize I've made many mistakes. Not just with Helen and David, but with you too. I've been so focused on maintaining the Townsend legacy, I forgot what really matters." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. "Dad, Charles held up a hand. "Let me finish. You've shown me what true strength is. It's not about power or money or influence. It's about compassion, about being there for family no matter what. I'm proud of you, Amelia. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see what truly matters." This moment marked a shift in Amelia's relationship with her father. As they worked together to support David and his family, Amelia saw a softer side of Charles emerge. He began to open up about his own childhood, his complicated feelings towards Helen, and his regret over the years lost with David. Meanwhile, Amelia's internal struggles continued. The more time she spent with David's family, the more she questioned her own life choices. She had always assumed she would take over the family business, continue the Townsend legacy. But now she found herself drawn to the idea of using her resources and influence to make a real difference in people's lives. One afternoon, as she sat by David's bedside, helping Emily with her homework, an idea began to form. What if she could combine her business acumen with a newfound passion for helping others? What if the Townsend legacy could be about more than just accumulating wealth? As the weeks passed, Amelia's idea grew into a plan. She began to research healthcare initiatives, rare disease foundations, and medical research programs. She spent long nights drafting proposals, reaching out to contacts in the medical field, and reimagining the future of Townsend Enterprises. All the while, she continued to support David and his family. Emily's treatment was showing promising results, and David's condition, while still serious, had stabilized. The family was growing closer, the years of separation slowly being bridged by shared experiences and newfound understanding. Helen, despite her own declining health, seemed to draw strength from these family gatherings. She spent hours by David's bedside, making up for lost time, sharing stories of his father James and getting to know Sarah and Emily. As for Amelia, she found herself transformed. The driven, somewhat isolated woman she had been just months ago was gone, replaced by someone more compassionate, more connected, and more determined than ever to make a difference. One evening, as she left the hospital after a long day, Amelia paused in the parking lot, looking up at the stars. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the midnight phone call, the search for David, the family secrets uncovered. She thought about Helen's courage, David's resilience, and the unwavering love of Sarah and Emily. In that moment, Amelia felt a sense of peace wash over her. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, David's health, Emily's treatment, the changes she planned to make at Townsend Enterprises, she was ready to face them, because now she understood what truly mattered. It wasn't about money or power or maintaining a perfect image. It was about family, about love, about being there for each other through the good times and the bad. As she got into her car, Amelia made a silent vow. She would honor the lessons she had learned, the growth she had experienced, and she would use her position and resources not just for the benefit of her family, but for all those who struggled with illness, with poverty, with injustice. The Townsend legacy would become one of compassion, of making a real difference in the world. With a smile, Amelia started her car and drove home, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. The journey had been long and often painful, but it had led her exactly where she needed to be. And for that she was profoundly grateful. The day of David's release from the hospital arrived with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Amelia had arranged for him to be transferred to a private rehabilitation facility where he could continue his recovery while being close to his family. As she drove to the hospital with Helen and Charles, the air in the car was thick with unspoken emotions. Upon arrival, they found David sitting up in bed, looking pale but determined. Sarah and Emily were by his side, their faces a mixture of excitement and worry. As the Townsend family entered the room, there was a moment of awkward silence before Helen stepped forward, her arms outstretched. "My boy," she said softly, embracing David, "I'm so glad you're well enough to leave this place." David returned the hug, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Mom," he replied, the words still new and strange on his lips. "I'm glad you're here." What? As the family gathered around David's bed, the years of separation seemed to melt away. Charles, still uncomfortable but trying, approached his brother. "David," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. I'm sorry. For everything. I hope we can start anew." David looked at his brother for a long moment before nodding slowly. "It won't be easy, Charles, but I'm willing to try." The process of getting David ready to leave was a flurry of activity. Nurses came and went, giving last-minute instructions and packing up medical supplies. Through it all, Amelia watched her newfound family interact, marveling at the bonds that were forming despite years of separation and hurt. As they wheeled David out of the hospital, Emily walking alongside holding her father's hand, Amelia felt a surge of emotion. This was what family was supposed to be, supporting each other, being there in times of need, overcoming differences. The drive to the rehabilitation facility was filled with quiet conversation. David asked about the Townsend family history, and Helen, with occasional interjections from Charles, filled in the gaps. It was a sanitized version of events, Amelia noticed, with the harshest truths softened for now. There would be time for the full story later. At the facility, Amelia had arranged for a large, private room with enough space for family to visit comfortably. As they settled David in, Sarah pulled Amelia aside. "This is too much," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the luxurious surroundings. "We can't afford." Amelia gently cut her off. "Please, Sarah, let us do this for David, for all of you. It's the least we can do after everything." Sarah looked like she might argue further, but then David called out, asking for her. As Sarah moved to her husband's side, Amelia saw the love between them, the strength they drew from each other. It made her heart ache with a longing she hadn't realized she felt. Over the next few weeks, the rehabilitation facility became a second home for the extended Townsend family. Amelia split her time between work, visiting David, and spending time with Helen, whose own health was becoming increasingly fragile. One afternoon, as Amelia sat with David while he rested between therapy sessions, he turned to her with a serious expression. "Amelia," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks, "I need to thank you. Not just for all this," he gestured around the room, "but for finding me, for bringing my mother back into my life." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. "You don't need to thank me, David. We're family. This is what family does." David reached out and took her hand. "That's just it. I never knew what I was missing, having such a small family. But now I see what I've gained. It's not about the money or the fancy facility. And it's about having people who care, who show up, who fight for you." As Amelia squeezed David's hand, she felt a shift within herself. The drive that had always pushed her to succeed in business, to prove herself worthy of the Townsend name, was transforming into something deeper, more meaningful. Later that week, during a family dinner in David's room, the conversation turned to Emily's condition. The experimental treatment was showing promise, but there were still many uncertainties. "The doctors are optimistic," Sarah explained, "but the long-term effects are unknown. And the cost of continuing treatment," she trailed off, the worry evident in her voice. Charles, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. "The cost won't be an issue. The Townsend family will cover all of Emily's medical expenses for as long as necessary." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Charles in surprise. It was the first time he had made such a definitive statement about supporting David's family. David's voice was thick with emotion when he finally spoke. "Charles, thank you. But it's too much. We can't accept." "You can and you will," Charles interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "It's time I started acting like the brother and uncle I should have been all along." Amelia watched as David and Charles locked eyes, years of unspoken words passing between them. Slowly David nodded, accepting his brother's offer, and with it, a new chapter in their relationship. As the evening wore on, Amelia found herself deep in conversation with Emily. The young girl, wise beyond her years due to her illness, spoke of her dreams for the future, dreams that, for the first time, seemed within reach. "I want to be a doctor," Emily confided. "I want to help kids like me who are dealing with rare diseases. Do you think I could do that, Aunt Amelia?" The title Aunt Amelia sent a warm thrill through her. "Emily, I think you can do anything you set your mind to, and I'll be here to support you every step of the way." As the family gathering wound down, Amelia noticed Helen sitting quietly in the corner, her eyes shining as she watched her reunited family interact. Amelia moved to sit beside her grandmother. "You okay, Helen?" she asked softly. Helen turned to her, a serene smile on her face. "My dear girl, I'm more than okay. I'm at peace." Seeing this, she gestured to the room, to David laughing with Charles, to Emily animatedly discussing her dreams with Sarah. "This is all I've ever wanted. You've given me this gift, Amelia. You brought our family together." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. "We did it together, Helen. All of us." As the evening came to a close and everyone prepared to leave, David called for their attention. "Before you go," he said, his voice strong despite his fatigue, "I want to say something. When I first learned about my adoption, I was angry. Angry at the parents who gave me up. Angry at the circumstances that took me away from my birth family. But now, looking at all of you, I realize something. Family isn't just about blood. It's about love, about showing up, about forgiveness." He paused, his eyes moving from face to face. "We've all made mistakes. We've all held on to hurts and resentments. But being here, surrounded by all of you, I know that none of that matters anymore. What matters is that we're here now, that we're choosing to be a family." Amelia felt tears streaming down her face, and looking around, she saw she wasn't alone. Even Charles, usually so stoic, was wiping at his eyes. David continued, his voice thick with emotion. "So thank you. Thank you for finding me, for accepting me and my family, for giving us this chance. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with all of you by my side." As David finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. One by one, they moved to embrace him, this man who had been a stranger just months ago and was now an integral part of their family. As they left the facility that night, Amelia felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. The Townsend family, long fractured by secrets and pride, was healing. There were still challenges ahead: David's ongoing recovery, Emily's treatment, Helen's declining health, but for the first time, Amelia felt confident that they would face these challenges together. The drive home was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. As they neared the Townsend mansion, Charles suddenly spoke. "Amelia," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "I owe you an apology. When you first started this search, I thought you were being foolish, stirring up trouble. But now I see you've given us all a second chance. You've reminded me of what's truly important." Amelia reached out and squeezed her father's hand. "We all played a part in this, Dad. We're all learning and growing together." As they pulled up to the mansion, Amelia was struck by how different it looked to her now. Once a symbol of the Townsend legacy, of wealth and power, it now seemed like just a house. A big, beautiful house, but just a house nonetheless. The true Townsend legacy, she realized, wasn't in bricks and mortar or stocks and bonds. It was in the connections they were building, the love they were sharing, the wounds they were healing. That night, as Amelia prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. From that first mysterious phone call to the emotional family gathering she had just left, every step had led her here. She had set out to uncover family secrets, to find a long-lost uncle. What she had found instead was a new understanding of herself, of her family, of what truly mattered in life. As she drifted off to sleep, Amelia felt a sense of purpose settling over her. There was still much to be done: David's recovery to support, Emily's treatment to oversee, Helen's remaining time to cherish. And beyond that, she had ideas forming, plans for how to use the Townsend resources to make a real difference in the world. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, disagreements, moments of doubt. But Amelia knew now that she wouldn't be facing these challenges alone. She had her family, all of her family by her side, and together they could face anything. As the mansion settled into silence, the stars twinkling outside her window, Amelia smiled to herself. The Townsend family saga was far from over. In many ways, she realized it was just beginning, and she couldn't wait to see what the next chapter would bring. As the weeks passed, the Townsend family settled into a new rhythm. David's recovery progressed slowly but steadily, with daily visits from various family members providing encouragement and support. Amelia found herself spending more time at the rehabilitation facility than at her office, much to the concern of the Townsend Enterprises Board of Directors. However, it was Helen's rapidly declining health that cast a shadow over the family's newfound happiness. Despite the joy of reuniting with her long-lost son, Helen's cancer was aggressive, and her condition deteriorated faster than anyone had anticipated. One crisp autumn morning, Amelia received a call from Helen's nurse. "Miss Townsend, you should come quickly. Your grandmother, she doesn't have much time left." Amelia's heart sank as she rushed to Helen's apartment. She found her grandmother in bed, looking frail and pale, but with a serene smile on her face. "Amelia, my dear," Helen whispered as Amelia took her hand. "I'm so glad you're here. There's something I need to tell you." Fighting back tears, Amelia leaned in closer. "What is it, Helen?" "I want you to know how proud I am of you," Helen said, her voice weak but filled with emotion. "When you've done what I couldn't, you've brought our family together. Promise me you'll keep them together, even when I'm gone." Amelia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise, Helen, I promise." Over the next few hours, family members arrived one by one. David, still weak from his own health struggles, was wheeled in by Sarah, with Emily close behind. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the apartment windows, Helen gathered her strength to address her family one last time. "My dear ones," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I never thought I'd see this day. To have all of you here together, it's more than I ever dared to hope for." She turned to David, reaching out a trembling hand to touch his face. "My boy, my beautiful boy. I'm so sorry for the years we lost, but know that I have loved you every day of your life." David took her hand, pressing it to his cheek as tears fell from his eyes. "I love you too, Mom. I'm so grateful we had this time together." Helen then looked at Charles, her firstborn. "Charles, my son, I know our relationship has been complicated, but I want you to know that I've always loved you, always been proud of you. Please let go of the anger, the resentment. Life is too short for such burdens." Charles, usually so composed, broke down, sobbing as he clutched his mother's hand. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. I love you." Finally, Helen turned to Amelia. "My dear Amelia, you are the heart of this family now. Keep them together, remind them of what's truly important, and know that I will always be with you, watching over you all." As the night deepened, Helen's breathing became more labored. The family gathered close, offering comfort and love in her final moments. In the early hours of the morning, with a peaceful smile on her face, Helen took her last breath, surrounded by the family she had longed for all these years. The days following Helen's passing were a blur of grief and arrangements. Amelia threw herself into organizing the funeral, determined to honor her grandmother's memory in the way she deserved. It was to be a celebration of Helen's life, of her love that had endured decades of separation, of the family she had brought together in her final days. On the day of the funeral, the Townsend family presented a united front. Charles and David, still tentative in their newfound brotherhood, stood side by side. Sarah and Emily, though not related by blood, were every bit a part of the family, offering support and comfort. As Amelia stood to deliver the eulogy, she looked out at the gathered mourners. There were faces she recognized from the business world, society acquaintances, but also many she didn't know, people whose lives Helen had touched during her years away from the Townsend family. Helen Townsend, Amelia began, her voice strong despite her grief, was a woman of extraordinary strength and love. For years she lived with the pain of separation from her family, but she never let that pain harden her heart. Instead, she poured her love into helping others, into building a life of meaning and purpose. Amelia paused, looking at her father and uncle. In her final weeks, Helen saw her greatest wish fulfilled. She was reunited with her sons, met the grandchildren she never knew she had. She saw her family whole again. Tears flowed freely as Amelia continued, but Helen's legacy isn't just in the family she brought together. It's in the lesson she taught us all, that love endures, that it's never too late for forgiveness, that family is about more than just blood. As the service concluded and the family prepared to leave for the cemetery, Amelia felt a hand on her arm. She turned to find David looking at her, his eyes red-rimmed but filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything, for finding me, for bringing us all together. Helen, Mom, she got her wish because of you." Amelia embraced her uncle, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had made a promise to Helen, and she intended to keep it. In the days following the funeral, the family faced the difficult task of sorting through Helen's belongings. It was a bittersweet process, filled with tears and laughter as they discovered mementos and photographs that told the story of Helen's life. Among Helen's things, Amelia found a letter addressed to her. With trembling hands, she opened it. "My dearest Amelia, if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, but please don't be sad. Thanks to you, I left this world with a joyful heart, surrounded by the family I had longed for all these years. You have a strength in you, Amelia, a strength that comes from love. Use that strength to keep our family together. Help Charles and David heal their relationship. Be there for Emily as she faces her health challenges. And most importantly, don't lose sight of your own dreams and aspirations. Remember, my dear, that the true Townsend legacy isn't in wealth or status, but in the love we share and the lives we touch. I love you always and forever. Your Helen." I'm tasting the fund. Amelia clutched the letter to her chest, fresh tears flowing. She made a silent vow to honor Helen's wishes, to be the heart of the family, to use the Townsend resources to make a real difference in the world. As the family gathered for dinner that evening, the mood was somber but not without hope. David, looking stronger each day, raised his glass in a toast. "To Helen," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who never gave up on love, on family. And may we honor her memory by cherishing each other, by being the family she always dreamed we could be." As glasses clinked and tears were wiped away, Amelia felt a sense of purpose solidify within her. The road ahead would not be easy. There were still challenges to face: David's ongoing recovery, Emily's health issues, the changes she planned to make at Townsend Enterprises. But looking around the table at the faces of her family, her father Charles, slowly learning to open his heart, David and Sarah, their love a testament to the family they had built, Emily, her eyes bright with dreams for the future, Amelia knew they would face these challenges together. Helen might be gone, but her love, her spirit lived on in each of them, and Amelia was determined to ensure that the family Helen had brought together would remain strong, united, and true to the values she had held dear. As the evening wore on and conversation flowed more freely, Amelia found herself filled with a bittersweet mix of grief and hope. They had lost Helen, yes, but in losing her they had found each other, and that, Amelia realized, was Helen's true legacy, a family united, ready to face whatever the future might bring together. As the Townsend family settled into their new reality, life began to take on a semblance of normalcy. David's recovery continued, with each day bringing small but significant improvements. Emily's treatment was showing promising results, though the road ahead remained long and uncertain. Amelia divided her time between family obligations and her work at Townsend Enterprises, where she was slowly but surely implementing changes to align the company with her newfound values. It was on a crisp autumn morning, nearly 6 months after Helen's passing, that the unexpected occurred. Amelia was in her office, reviewing proposals for a new healthcare initiative, when her assistant burst in, looking flustered. "Ms. Townsend," she said, her voice trembling, "there's a man here to see you." He says he's James Townsend." Amelia felt the world tilt on its axis. James Townsend, her grandfather, Helen's long-lost love, the man they all believed had died decades ago. It couldn't be possible. "Send him in," Amelia heard herself say, her heart pounding in her chest. The man who entered her office was elderly, his steps slow and measured, but there was a vitality in his eyes that belied his age. As Amelia looked at him, she saw echoes of David, of herself in his features. "Amelia," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm James. I'm your grandfather." For a moment Amelia couldn't speak. Then, finding her voice, she asked the question that burned in her mind. How is this possible? We thought you were dead." James sank into a chair, his eyes never leaving Amelia's face. "It's a long story, one I'm not proud of, but I'm here now and I'm ready to tell the truth." Over the next hour, James unfolded a tale that left Amelia reeling. He spoke of his love for Helen, of the pressure from the Townsend family to leave, of threats made against Helen and their unborn child. "I was young and scared," James admitted, his voice heavy with regret, "when your great-grandfather threatened to ruin Helen's life, to take away our child. I made a choice. I agreed to disappear, to let Helen and everyone else believe I had MEAS." Amelia listened, stunned, as James recounted years spent watching from afar, always longing to reach out, but held back by fear and shame. "I saw you grow up, Amelia," he said softly. "I saw David being raised by another family. I saw Charles become the man he is. And through it all, I was a coward, too afraid to step forward and face the consequences of my actions." "What changed?" Amelia asked, her mind still struggling to process this revelation. James's eyes filled with tears. "Helen, when I heard she was ill, that she had reunited with David, I knew I couldn't hide any longer. But by the time I worked up the courage, she was gone." Amelia felt a surge of anger, quickly followed by pity. This man, her grandfather, had lived with his choice for decades, watching his family from the shadows. "Why come forward now?" she asked. "Because it's time," James replied simply. "Time to face the truth, to try and make amends if I can. I don't expect forgiveness, Amelia, but I hope I can be a part of this family's life in whatever way you'll allow." As the reality of James's return sank in, Amelia knew she faced a difficult decision. How would the family react to this news? How would David feel, knowing the father he'd never met was alive? And Charles, how would he handle the return of the man who had, in his mind, torn their family apart? "I need time," Amelia said finally. This changes everything. I need to think about how to tell the others." James nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. I've waited this long, I can wait a little longer." As James left her office, Amelia felt the weight of this new secret settling on her shoulders. She had worked so hard to bring the family together, to heal old wounds. Now, with James's return, she feared all that progress might unravel. Over the next few days, Amelia grappled with how to handle this new development. She knew she couldn't keep James's return a secret. The truth had to come out. But how to do it in a way that wouldn't shatter the fragile peace the family had found? Finally, she decided to speak with David first. Of all of them, he had the most right to know about James's return. She found David at the rehabilitation center, working through his physical therapy exercises. As she shared the news, she watched a myriad of emotions play across her uncle's face: shock, disbelief, anger, and finally a cautious hope. "He's alive," David whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "My father, he's really alive?" Amelia nodded, taking David's hand. "He is, and he wants to meet you, if you're willing." David was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Then, slowly, he nodded. I think I'd like that." The meeting between James and David was emotional, to say the least. Years of absence, of unspoken words and unfulfilled dreams, hung in the air between them. But as they talked, as James shared his story and David listened, Amelia saw a connection forming, a tentative bridge across the chasm of years. Charles's reaction, when Amelia finally told him, was explosive. Years of resentment, of blame placed squarely on James's shoulders, came pouring out. "How dare he?" Charles raged, pacing the study. How dare he come back now after all these years? After what he did to our family?" Amelia let her father vent, understanding his anger, his pain. When he finally calmed, she spoke softly but firmly. "Dad, I know this is hard, but James is here now. He wants to make amends. Don't we owe it to ourselves, to Helen's memory, to at least hear him out?" It took time and many difficult conversations, but slowly the family began to adjust to James's presence. There were moments of tension, of old hurts resurfacing, but there were also moments of connection, of understanding. James shared stories of Helen that none of them had heard, painting a picture of the vibrant, loving woman she had been in her youth. He spoke of his regret, his shame at the choice he had made, and his desire to be a part of their lives now if they would have him. For David, James's return was a chance to know the father he had never had. For Emily, it was the discovery of a great-grandfather she had never known existed. And for Charles, though he struggled the most with James's return, it was an opportunity to finally understand the events that had shaped his childhood, to see his parents as flawed and human individuals rather than the larger-than-life figures of his memory. Those weeks turned into months. James became a regular presence in the family's life. He was there for family dinners, for Emily's doctor appointments, for David's therapy sessions. Slowly, cautiously, he was becoming a part of the fabric of their lives. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, James cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "I know my return has been complicated," he began, his voice wavering slightly. "I know I've caused pain, confusion. But I want you all to know how grateful I am for this second chance. Helen," his voice broke on her name, "Helen always believed in the power of love to heal, to overcome any obstacle. I see now that she was right." He looked around the table, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. This family, the one Helen dreamed of, the one Amelia brought together, it's more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. As James finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye at the table. Even Charles, who had struggled the most with James's return, reached out and clasped his father's hand. In that moment, Amelia felt a sense of completion, of pieces falling into place. The journey had been long and often painful, filled with unexpected twists and turns. But here they were, the Townsend family, whole at last. James's return had brought with it challenges, yes, but also gifts. It had forced them all to confront the past, to grapple with forgiveness and redemption. It had brought new perspectives, new understanding, and ultimately a deeper, richer sense of family. As Amelia looked around the table, at the faces of those she loved, her father Charles, slowly learning to let go of old resentments, David and Sarah, their love a testament to the family they had built, Emily, her eyes bright with the promise of a future now filled with even more love, and James, the missing piece they hadn't known they were missing, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. This, she realized, was Helen's true legacy, not just the family she had brought together in her final days, but the love that continued to grow, to heal, to overcome all obstacles. In reuniting them, in bringing James back into the fold, Helen's love continued to work its magic even beyond the grave. As the evening wore on, filled with laughter and shared stories, Amelia silently renewed her vow to Helen. She would continue to nurture this family, to be its heart, to ensure that the love Helen had fought so hard for would continue to flourish for generations to come. The Townsend family saga was far from over. There would be more challenges to face, more storms to weather. But now, united and stronger than ever, they were ready to face whatever the future might bring together. As the seasons changed and a year passed, since Helen's passing, the Townsend family found themselves in a place of healing and growth. David's recovery had progressed remarkably, and he was now able to walk short distances without assistance. Emily's treatment had shown significant success, with her doctors cautiously optimistic about her long-term prognosis. Amelia had successfully implemented several changes at Townsend Enterprises, steering the company towards more philanthropic endeavors. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the day when Amelia had first met Helen, The family gathered at the Townsend mansion for a special occasion. It was the opening day of the Helen Townsend Memorial Hospital, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to researching and treating rare diseases. As Amelia stood at the podium, preparing to give her speech, she looked out at the faces of her family. Charles sat in the front row, his face a mixture of pride and melancholy. Beside him were David and Sarah, their hands intertwined, with Emily beaming next to them. And there, a little apart but undeniably part of the group, sat James, his eyes misty with unshed tears. Today, Amelia began, her voice strong and clear. We honor not just a name but a legacy. Helen Townsend was a woman who understood that true wealth lies not in bank accounts or stock portfolios, but in the lives we touch and the love we share. She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the assembled crowd. This hospital is more than just a building. It's a promise to those who suffer from rare diseases that they are not forgotten, a promise to families struggling with the unknown that they are not alone, and most of all, a promise to Helen that her spirit of love and compassion will continue to change lives for generations to come. As Amelia concluded her speech and the ribbon was cut, officially opening the hospital, she felt a sense of completion. This was the culmination of everything she had learned, everything she had fought for since that fateful day when she first heard Helen's voice on the phone. The family toured the facility together, marveling at the advanced equipment and the bright, hope-filled atmosphere. Emily was particularly excited, peppering the doctors with questions about their research and treatments. As they walked, James fell into step beside Amelia. "You've done a remarkable thing here, Amelia," he said softly. "Helen would be so proud." Amelia smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, Grandpa. I hope she would be." Later that evening, as the family gathered for dinner at the mansion, there was a palpable sense of joy and accomplishment in the air. Charles raised his glass in a toast. "To Helen," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and to Amelia, who has truly shown us what the Townsend legacy should be." As glasses clinked and smiles were exchanged, Amelia felt a surge of love for her family. They had come so far, overcome so much, but she knew their journey wasn't over. After dinner, as they sat in the living room, Emily cleared her throat nervously. "I have something to tell you all," she said, her voice quavering slightly. "I've been accepted into the pre-med program at Harvard. I want to become a doctor to help kids like me." The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. David and Sarah hugged their daughter, tears of joy and pride in their eyes. Amelia felt her heart swell with happiness for her young cousin. As the excitement died down, Charles spoke up. "I have an announcement too," he said, surprising everyone. "I've decided to step down as CEO of Townsend Enterprises. Amelia, I want you to take over." Amelia gasped, shocked by her father's words. "Dad, are you sure?" Charles nodded, a soft smile on his face. "I've never been more sure of anything. You've shown me what our company can be, what our family can be. It's time for a new generation to lead the way." Amelia felt overwhelmed by the trust her father was placing in her. She looked around at her family, seeing encouragement and support in their faces. Slowly she nodded. "I'd be honored, Dad." As the evening wore on, plans were made and dreams were shared. David spoke of his desire to start a support group for heart attack survivors. Sarah mentioned her interest in patient advocacy. James, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "I know I came into your lives late," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "but I want you all to know how grateful I am to be here. And I want to do my part. I'd like to establish a scholarship fund, in Helen's name, for students who want to study medicine but can't afford it." The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted in a chorus of approval. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes as she watched her family, once fractured and distant, now united in purpose and love. As the night drew to a close and family members began to depart, Amelia found herself standing on the terrace, looking out over the grounds. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see her father. "You've done well, Amelia," Charles said softly. You've brought this family together in a way I never could. You've honored your grandmother's memory and created a legacy that will outlive us all." Amelia leaned her head on her father's shoulder, feeling a closeness to him that had been missing for so long. "We did it together, Dad, all of us." As they stood there, the cool night air wrapping around them, Amelia felt a sense of peace settle over her. The journey had been long and often difficult, filled with unexpected twists and painful revelations. But it had led them here to this moment of unity and purpose. The Townsend family had been transformed. No longer defined by wealth and status, they were now bound by love, compassion, and a shared commitment to making a difference in the world. Helen's dream of a united family had not only come true, but had blossomed into something even more beautiful than she could have imagined. As Amelia prepared for bed that night, she found herself thinking of Helen. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice, filled with pride and love. "You did it, my dear," the voice seemed to say. "You've created a legacy of love." Amelia smiled, feeling a sense of completion and a thrill of anticipation for what was to come. The Townsend family story wasn't ending. In many ways, it was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. But now, united and strong, they were ready to face whatever the future might bring. As she drifted off to sleep, Amelia's last thoughts were of gratitude. Gratitude for the journey that had brought them here, for the love that had sustained them, and for the legacy they were creating together. A legacy not of wealth or power, but of compassion, unity, and the enduring power of family love. And the next morning, as Amelia prepared for her first day as CEO of Townsend Enterprises, she paused before leaving her room. On her dresser sat a framed photo of Helen, smiling and full of life. Amelia touched the frame gently, a smile playing on her lips. "So we did it, Helen," she whispered. "We brought the family together, and now we're going to change the world." With that, Amelia stepped out into the new day, ready to lead her family and their legacy into a future bright with promise and possibility. The Townsend cigar continued, a testament to the enduring power of love, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Drawing from the story's themes and characters, here's a message that aims to touch the emotional core of the audience. Family isn't just about blood, it's about love, about showing up, about forgiveness, David once said. And he was right. The Townsend family's journey teaches us that it's never too late to heal, to forgive, to love. Helen's words still echo, love endures, it's never too late for forgiveness, and family is about more than just blood. The story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, love can light the way home. Amelia's promise to Helen rings true for us all. "I promise to keep them together, even when you're gone." It's a vow we can all make to nurture our relationships, to fight for our families, to keep love alive even in the face of loss. James's return taught us that it's time to face the truth, to try and make amends if we can. That his courage reminds us that it's never too late to right our wrongs, to seek forgiveness, to come home. Emily's dream to help kids like me shows us the power of turning our pain into purpose. Our struggles can become our strength, our challenges our calling. Charles's journey from resentment to acceptance teaches us that it's time for a new generation to lead the way. We must be willing to let go of old hurts, to embrace change, to trust in the future. And remember Amelia's words, the true Townsend legacy isn't in wealth or status, but in the love we share and the lives we touch. Our true wealth lies not in our bank accounts, but in the hearts we touch, the lives we change. In the end, the Townsend family's story is our story. It's a reminder that no matter how broken we may feel, how lost we may be, love has the power to heal us, to bring us home, to make us whole. So let us learn from Helen, from Amelia, from all the Townsends. Let us love fiercely, forgive freely, and remember always that family, whether by blood or by choice, is the greatest gift we have. In the words of Helen, the true Townsend legacy isn't in wealth or status, but in the love we share and the lives we touch. May we all have the courage to uncover our truths, the strength to face our past, and the love to build a future together. For in the end, it's not about the years we've lost, but the moments we create, the bonds we forge, and the love we share that truly define us. Dear viewers, as Helen once said, the true Townsend legacy isn't in wealth or status, but in the love we share and the lives we touch. And we hope this story has touched your heart and perhaps even inspired you to reflect on your own family bonds. If you've enjoyed the Townsend family saga, we'd be thrilled if you could show your support by subscribing to our channel. Your subscription helps us continue creating content that moves and inspires. Now we'd love to hear from you. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment with the number 1. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us understand what touches our audience's hearts. But you're eager to know what's next for the Townsends? If you're interested in a potential sequel, comment with the number 2. Your enthusiasm could be the spark that ignites the next chapter of this family's journey. And remember, as Amelia said, we did it together, all of us. In that spirit, if you have any thoughts, disagreements, or perspectives you'd like to share about the story, please leave them in the comments. Your insights could add a whole new dimension to the narrative. Lastly, by subscribing to our channel, you're not just supporting us, you're joining a community that believes in the power of storytelling to change lives. As David wisely noted, family isn't just about blood. It's about love, about showing up, about forgiveness. Let's show up for each other in this digital family of ours. Thank you for being part of this journey. We can't wait to see where it takes us next together.